Hey everybody, it's your old pal Steve Moore here, owner of Run More, this fabulous brick and mortar running shop located in Westminster, Maryland. Today we're going to spend some time talking about the New Balance 1080 version 14 that's coming out in fall of 2024. This is New Balance's crown jewel of their max cushion lineup. For people that have been long-time runners and long-distance runners, you've probably popped a 1080 on your foot once in a while just to check her out, maybe put it through its paces. I would say as far as like New Balance shoes we carry, this has probably the most highest brand name recognition that people have come in and asked specifically for. This is a $165 max cushion shoe. On the men's side, it weighs 10.7 ounces, and on the women's, it's 8.3. This shoe has a 6 millimeters drop, going from 38 down to 32 millimeters. It features New Balance's Fresh Foam X midsole, and the upper is made of an engineered mesh. So, if you've been ride or die with a 1080 or just New Balance in general, that Fresh Foam midsole has really been their pride and joy for a long time. You know, I like to see when brands really lean into some of their specific nitty-gritty things, and I like that they've always been putting Fresh Foam in the name and on the shoe. They're really proud of it, and it's something that is featured in a lot of their models. This is their most pillowy option that they have out there for more of a run shoe. But I will tell you, like, putting it on, even though like the specs from version 13 to 14 look so similar, the drop, the midsole, all of the stack height, all of those are very similar. We put on a bunch of weight. This shoe definitely got heftier. And not necessarily because it like is a wider shoe or anything, or even that there's tons of difference on the outsole, even though there are, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I think the big difference between those two that jumped out to me is as soon as I put it on, it was definitely denser. You know, and if you followed some of my reviews over the years, first off, thank you. But second off, I typically don't like a super soft shoe for running. You know, they're great for putzing around town and as such for like an everyday walker or just a work shoe. But when I'm running, I don't necessarily always like a shoe that is so soft that I feel like I'm sinking into it. I just feel like it sort of wastes a lot of my momentum down into the ground, unless it's something really bouncy. And to me, the 1080 has never been that bouncy shoe. It's been much more of a comfort shoe than like a performance shoe. And especially as New Balance has extended their lines and added more stuff in that more performance-y feel, they've kept the 1080 more that true to feel, soft, pillowy feel. So I was actually kind of surprised popping this on that it felt denser. And then just to make sure I wasn't going cray-cray, I put on an old version and a new version and putzed around the shop for a day or so just to kind of make sure that I understood the differences between the two. And you can certainly feel the differences. Not so much in the weight, even though it's spec'd like 10% heavier on the new one, I didn't notice it underfoot as far as feeling clunkier in this. I just felt like I was definitely denser in it. And running in it, which I got to put through a couple runs, I could feel the difference between it. And again, I like that firmer feel, and this definitely felt a little bit firmer. Didn't necessarily give me much more bounce to it though. I will say I was kind of hoping by adding some density to it, and especially if we're sacrificing a little bit of weight, whether I feel it or not, I felt like, you know, adding the weight, I would get a little more responsiveness to it. I just didn't. Not a bad thing or a thing, just something I noticed. And really, it's not meant to be that. You know, I think in my head, I want everything to be like a rocket ship under me, and that's not what the intended purpose is. If that's sort of what you want, check out some other videos of some of their New Balance products we have out there, because they have some killer stuff down the line. And I just want to also say, for us in the shop, this has been a tremendous year for New Balance. Really, almost everything that I've put on my foot from New Balance has been way better than previous versions, and we can tell by people coming in here that are like switching from other brands into New Balance. So I think if you've been a fan of New Balance, this has been a great year. This shoe just quite frankly, I didn't feel like this shoe had so much more to it that I wanted to go out and put a bunch of miles onto it. It's super comfortable, and for that type of person who wants just a pinch firmer of a neutral cushion high max shoe, this is a fine option for you, especially if you're somebody who's been in a 1080. You're gonna find that this, while it's just a pinch firmer, it's gonna perform pretty similar. They definitely made this feel a little more glidey, but not necessarily bouncy, just sort of more efficient with it. One of the things I always like on New Balance as somebody who's got a big fat foot is the way the shoe in the upper fits my foot. This is definitely nice and stretchy, and that's one thing you can kind of even see on my old 1080, like how my bunion sort of bumped out on here. you know, I don't mind that you can see it on here, but I think it's even better is that the shoe sort of stretched around it. And I think that's how we're gonna find on the new 1080 as well. Out of the box, I at first felt like this was gonna be a little more narrow than I wanted, but on my runs and such, I had no pain later in the night, which typically happens for me if I'm running in a shoe that's a pinch too narrow. I'll feel it later in the day, and I had no such thing with the new 1080. It felt like it did expand where I needed it to be, and it was certainly nice and breathable. And that's a nice thing on this shoe because it does weigh a little bit more than its predecessor, but it felt nice and flowy and breathable. They changed their outsole a little bit on it. If we're looking at our old 1080 versus our new one, you can see the pattern's just a pinch different. And I'm wondering if that also added a little bit of weight to it. But I'm guessing by sort of making the shoe a pinch denser and changing our outsole pattern on it, you're gonna get a little more durability to it. And I think that is one thing when you're in a super soft marshmallowy shoe is that it can sacrifice durability because of the softness to it. So I think some of those things, we're gonna improve the last of this shoe and just give you a couple more fun-filled miles on it. I also think one of the reasons why they made this shoe a little bit denser is that they're really trying to separate it from the Fresh Foam More. So, you know, New Balance has added, a couple years ago, they added another max cushion neutral shoe, the More. And as you guessed it, the More is just a little more than the 1080, even though the price is actually less. But the 1080 versus the More, you can see that this has just got more volume, it's got more fit around the foot. And you know, some people will use this almost as like a recovery shoe. They'll use this as like a day after shoe to just putz around town and give your body a break. And that's sort of how I prefer the More. I'm gonna again nicely say, I don't love running in either of these. Again, it's a personal preference thing. I don't necessarily think this is a shoe that I'd go out and do 20 miles in because I feel like it would just take a little more energy and effort for me to get through it than some of the other great products that New Balance has out there. But if I'm going out, quite honestly, to use a shoe to work all day in, I'm gonna gravitate towards the More. I just find like we've got 44 millimeters of stack height. The weight is comparable. The width is a little bit better. So if you're looking for a shoe, not necessarily to run in every day, but to just sort of be in every day, I would go with the More. That's a personal thing. But the 1080 has been that tried and true shoe for so many people. So maybe if you have a little bit slimmer of a foot, maybe a little bit less volume, and you want something that has just a little bit more density than what you've experienced in previous 1080s, you'll be quite happy with the new 1080. And you know, as somebody who carries a bunch of shoes, and obviously we sell this shoe, we leaned in heavy on the 1080. You know, not just because it has that brand recognition, but I think even just sort of aesthetically, if you pick it up, it's not so bulky underfoot. And I think it's gonna be a little easier for people who haven't been in a 1080 before, or even a Fresh Foam More, to kind of snatch off the wall and feel comfortable right out of the gate in. I hope some of that makes sense, and I hope it'll help you kind of figure out the differences for yourself between a 1080 and a Fresh Foam More. We're happy to be stocking them here at the shop, so if you wanted to pick up either of them, you certainly can, and we'll have a link down below if you want to shop from us, which we always appreciate. And if you enter promo code RUNMORE, you will save 10% on your order, and we'll ship them out for free. If you found this review helpful at all, do me a solid, like and subscribe. It's a fun, easy, free way to support the shop. And if you're in the greater Westminster, Maryland area, stop on by and say hello. Happy running, and hopefully we'll see you around town.